Story 1. The gut-wrenching, bottomless pit of despair that you feel when your brother decides it's time to exit life. Never have I screamed as long or as hard as I did when receiving that news, and never have I felt more pain. It's almost impossible to describe. Story 2. That wave of sadness that hits you in the middle of the day. It hunches your back, drops down your shoulders, takes that step out of your walk, and sucks your aura inwards into making you invisible. It's painfully addictive. With the right music, it's the greatest feeling ever. But then, that's heroin, isn't it? Story 3. Realizing mid-sentence that no one in the room is listening to you, so you just stop. It's not the worst, but pretty painful anyway. On the flip side, that one person in the group who noticed and said, "Wait, you didn't finish your story. What happened next?" Story 4. I've had sleep paralysis a couple of times, and it's pretty horrible. You try with every ounce of strength to move and roll over, but you just can't. I can only imagine that this could be something along the lines of what a paraplegic must feel every single day. Story 5. Feeling like you aren't enough, that everyone around you is better and more likable, and that you'll never fit in or be part of something. I had a toxic friendship with someone for years, and this was all I got out of it. Story 6. Here is the revised text with corrections made as per your request. The morning after a tragedy, you wake up slowly, and at first, all you register is that you're warm and pleasantly sleepy. The world is still a good place. Then you remember the previous day, and your stomach drops, and you lose your breath. That abrupt departure from contentment to abject horror is the worst feeling in the world. Story 7. Knowing that someone is hurting you, yet you cannot do a thing but wait for it to end. The feeling of helplessness and vulnerability haunts you even after it is over. Story 8. Being in tremendous debt, like where it's so bad that you wake up in the morning and your first thought when you realize who you are is that you're in terrible debt. Story 9. Being alone for 20 years, missing all the best years of your life, and feeling there's just no escape possible. I'm still relatively young, 31, but it's just so sad. It did not need to be like this at all. I moved schools and people were just different, and I could never fit in. Story 10. Deep itch, as I'd call it. I don't know if there's a medical term. I had it once after a sunburn, and my niece experienced it after knee surgery. It's basically an itching sensation, but at 10 times the intensity, and it feels like it's inside of you where you can't reach it. The sensation threatens to overwhelm you. It's definitely the worst sensation I have ever endured, even compared to having my jawbone sawed without anesthesia. Story 11. I've had one feeling that hit me more when I drank all the time, which I can only describe as acute, agonizing, almost colicky, yet simultaneously empty despair. It was like doom was at my doorstep. Words won't do it justice, so there's not much I can say to describe it. I guess think of it like all the excitement you have as a kid on Christmas morning, but instead of excitement, it's unfathomable dread and a desire to do anything to make the feeling stop. Like a horror movie's culmination, but you know you're not the main character and have no plot armor. Story 12. When my 21-year-old cat died while I was holding her, that night was the worst night of my life. Giving her body to be cremated, knowing I would never pet her again or kiss her on her fluffy head, was heartbreaking. I can barely type this without crying. I am at work with tears in my eyes this fast. Story 13. Because I was raised by older parents and have seen it firsthand, I realize that one day after I die, the world that I used to know will die too, and that every single person that lived a while ago went through the same thing. This also happens very gradually and slowly throughout everyone's lifetime, and nothing is immune to that type of change. Story 14. Mourning. That feeling that invades your mind and body when you remember the name of somebody you love who died before you. If anyone has ever experienced tear gas, it is the most similar thing I can think of. An instant and intense, debilitating state of perception. Everything in that moment seems so hopeless and full of horror and hurt, as if it will never end. And then, a few minutes later, you compose yourself and continue until next time. The only difference is tear gas isn't actually all that dangerous in its most common application on healthy people. While on the other hand, remembering your fallen friends and family can lead to intense bouts of anxiety and depression, which have both been known to occasionally result in suicide. To everyone who feels like this is them, my condolences. In my experience, the pain never gets smaller, your tolerance to it grows. In practice, it will get better as long as you don't have an existential crisis about mortality. Story 15. When you have been fighting an especially difficult situation, and after 20 minutes of pushing and making progress, you run out of strength and rest for a moment, only to feel your efforts receding back, undoing all of your progress. Story 16. Picking up something that turns out to be sticky, such as honey and jam, which are the worst, and you wash your hands, but you still feel sticky. Also, that mushy, slippery sensation when you realize you've stepped in dog excrement. Story 17. I believe heartbreak has taken years off my life. It happened when members of my family, who had said they loved me, started deliberately making me feel totally unloved. I hope these gaslighting, passive-aggressive jerks experience the same treatment they dished out to me. Story 18. I'm on a heavy serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, and when I forget to take my medication, it will cause brain zaps. They aren't painful, but it's very uncomfortable and hard to describe. It's like little bolts of electricity randomly running throughout your brain. It also makes me feel disassociated from my body, and overall, I get very sick. I learned the hard way not to miss my meds. Story 19. Akathisia. It can be a side effect of medication. Before I knew the name, I would describe it as butterflies in my stomach, like a horrible, crawling feeling, and you have to move around endlessly and wiggle, or else you feel like you will explode. Possibly similar to restless leg syndrome, but I experienced it in my stomach as a side effect of certain medications. Long-term sufferers are known to be driven to suicide. Story 20. Unrequited love. It hurts so bad, and it is indescribable how painful it is. Loving someone and wanting to be with them, while they see nothing in you, hurts so bad. Story 21. Abandonment. People whom you trusted turning on you, or being left out, thinking you were close to someone, but realizing it was a one-way thing. It's like heartbreak with battery acid on top. Story 22. When you were a kid and your dad is about to come home from work soon and you messed up badly at school and your mom is going to tell him as soon as he walks through the door. Story 23. Grief is significant. Second to it is the feeling of disappointment, specifically the sensation of being let down by someone you placed your trust in. This effect is magnified if they have previously violated your trust, and you chose to give them another opportunity, only to find yourself disappointed once more. Story 24. Feeling knowing that my husband will not openly accept our sons if they have any sort of lifestyle choice outside of what he considers normal. His views have been crazy post-Trump agenda. I never would have married him if I knew he would be this way. Our boys were ring bearers in a wedding for our niece and her now wife. His side, no issues before the so-called orange train. The politics of that era have changed a lot. My youngest, almost 3, is obsessed with Frozen. My husband is ready to have a coronary. He's 2.5. He loves the music, storyline, magic. He has no idea what is gender appropriate. I will absolutely divorce and pursue full custody if I ever question the emotional health of my children. I am watching everything very carefully. They matter more than anything. I honestly wonder how many marriages and relationships have suffered due to politics lately. Story 25. Grew up in a cult. Left after 40 years. Essentially, it was forbidden to make friends not in the cult. So, I am very isolated. When I left the cult, I lost everyone. Haven't spoken to friends of decades or any of my blood relatives for years. Have no one else because of it. I am as alone as anyone can be. My neighbor touched my shoulder talking to me. I almost cried because of the human contact. All deliberately imposed upon me for daring to question the leaders and the nature of existence. Pain I still can't understand, but not physical. Story 26. When your limb has been asleep, and you have that weird tingling sensation, then you try to move it and you get the strong, strange sensation that almost knocks the breath out of you. Nothing physically hurts the whole time, but it feels awful. Story 27. Guilt. I know there are probably worse feelings, but as an overly empathetic person, I hate the feeling of guilt. It's the reason why I've let so many people walk all over me and why everything that I do is carefully thought out so that I know my actions won't negatively impact others. I would rather be the person being hurt than the person hurting others. I know it sounds like I'm on my high horse writing this, but it is genuinely how I feel, and I honestly wish I was more selfish. Being this way is exhausting, and I am jealous of those who don't think like this. Story 28. Cognitive dissonance. The anguish of always knowing what you should do but not doing it, and the mental exhaustion of validating your actions. I am not even talking about major stuff. I am highly sensitive to cognitive dissonance and have no major stuff. It's the anguish of napping in the afternoon, or not replying to a text, or making an Amazon return. Therapy means I no longer turn this into self-hatred, but man, the anguish is just always there. Story 29. Being in a relationship with someone and loving them, but just being there like alone. They don't know how to make you feel special or loved. It's like you're just there and they work all the time, but they won't change jobs. I got divorced because of this. I was married for 8 years and had a wonderful daughter together. Couldn't be invisible. All he had to do was love me while he was home. I let him know exactly what I needed every 6 months for 2 years before I ended it. There's only so much alone one can take while not being alone, if that makes sense. To me, it's worse than being by yourself, which I'm 100% okay with. But don't be with someone but not with them. It's the worst heartbreak. That marriage could have lasted forever if he would have just worked at that. Story 30. Guilt, and specifically that guilt for which you can do nothing now. It's going to be there with you always. How you shouldn't have done one thing and now you can't do anything about it. Story 31. Shame. After going against your morals by saying you would never manipulate a situation like your narcissistic mother, but end up doing it right back at her, then feeling disgusted with yourself for becoming her, but unlike her, you feel endless amounts of bottomless shame. Story 32. 1. Heartbreak. Friend group exclusion. Acting like a jerk for no good reason and knowing you suck. You cheated, stole, acted badly, and you're on the cusp of getting caught and you're racked with anxiety. Story 33. Boredom is kind of really horrible. It's not one of the usual suspects, but oh my God, being bored is so horrible. I would rather be physically hurt than be bored. Story 34. Akathisia. Nothing on this list comes close to it. Imagine your brain is on fire and compelling you to move your body, so you walk until your feet bleed. Then you are exhausted and want to sleep, but you can't because your brain is compelling you to move. Add in a feeling of ants under your skin and utter terror, and you have hell on earth. It's not painful, but people with chronic akathisia are 6 times more likely to take their own lives than people with clinical depression. Story 35. Fear. Trust me, I'm Ukrainian from Mariupol. I was under aerial bombing for a few weeks. Once you've felt such fear, it never leaves. It stayed in my bones, and I don't know when, if ever, I will be fine again. Story 36. Honestly, give some credit to the feeling of suffering emotional abuse from your narcissistic partner whom you used to love profoundly, only to realize that all her love and affection was a lie used to manipulate you for her own validation, and that she never felt a single thing for you. That truly is terrible, my friend. Story 37. Grief. It ends up physically painful, and heartbreak can genuinely feel like your heart has shattered. Anxiety. All day long anxiety, but once again it can cause physical pain. Story 38. When you tip back just a little too far in a chair and you see your life flash before your eyes for a moment before you lean forward again. That oh no second lasts a lifetime. Story 39. One of the worst feelings that isn't physically painful is deep-seated loneliness. It is a profound sense of isolation and disconnection that can be incredibly distressing. Story 40. Mental pain is always worse than physical pain. I once also saw a girl passed out in a huge puddle of urine and feces that came from a bunch of overused portable toilets uphill in the evening towards the end of the festival. I'm pretty sure it was Roskilde Festival, which is quite a big one. Loads of people's waste must have flowed past, around, or on that poor girl. I wager those both are among the worst feelings. I'm suddenly very happy to not have had the experience of several people's waste touch me. Story 41. Finding out your significant other has been cheating, and then when confronting them, they just ghost you. Not only do you feel like you're not good enough for them because they cheated, but you feel like you're not even good enough for them to talk to you about it. Story 42. The most painful thing that isn't physically painful is the existential terror. The sudden, random moment in the day when you're struck with the overwhelming realization that you are alive, and that at some point you will inevitably face the one thing your entire being has been designed to avoid: death. In that fleeting moment of clarity, the weight of your mortality presses down on you, and you understand that no matter what you do, you cannot escape it. It will be the most terrifying experience of your life, and it will also be the last. Afterward, there will be no more love, no more joy, no more sadness, no more wonder, and no more contentment. Every emotion, every experience that once filled your life with meaning will simply cease. And worse, you won't even know they were ever there. What adds to this pain is the realization that, eventually, you too will be forgotten, just like the countless souls who have walked this earth before you. The stories of your life, the love you gave and received, the moments of laughter and sorrow, they will fade away, just as you will. In time, your existence will be swallowed by the passage of time, erased from memory, as if you had never been. It is this inevitable fading, this erasure of the self, that weighs on the human soul, a pain that cuts deeper than any physical wound. It is the fear of no longer being, of disappearing not only from the world but also from the hearts and minds of those who knew you. It's the silent understanding that life, in all its beauty and fragility, is temporary, and so too is everything you ever were. That is the most painful thing that isn't physically painful.